Today's guest on Around the Coin is Dawn Newton. She is the COO and co-founder of Netki. Dawn had a very successful exit earlier in her career, and she didn't have to work again. She traveled Europe. She pursued her love and passion of the culinary arts. She became a chef, a volunteer chef at a big-time restaurant. We talked about her journey there, what she learned, what the experience was like, and how she got pulled into crypto for her next business. Netki is one of the earliest crypto companies that I've talked to. They were started way before the 27 ICO boom and everything else. But they specifically address the issue of KYC, AML identification. So we talked about what they're trying to accomplish in the world, and we covered so much ground. We talked about the arc of society, humanity. This conversation was interstellar and real enjoyable for me. Please share the comment on the show if you enjoyed it. We really appreciate your feedback. And if you have suggestions for other guests, please let us know. Here is Dawn Newton. All right, Dawn, thanks for hopping on with me. I'm excited to learn more about you and learn through the things that you have learned. I love your background. You're currently at and have started Netki. What, give me the short just description of what Netki is, and then what was your involvement in those early days? Were you brought in like with the idea? Like how did that sort of form?
100%. So, what we do is basically compliance tools for, Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto. Lord knows those names have morphed over time. And the way I got into it was, early on in my career, I did a startup that was incredibly successful, which was NetZero, which was this free internet company, right? The AOL was charging $30 a month. These guys that created it thought like this should be free, like radio and regular TV. And so they had this idea that it should be ad supported. And I was industry hire number 2, and we came late to the party. There was already AOL. There was already Microsoft, there was already Earthlink. There was already Mindspring. And we just flipped the whole business around, onboarded millions of users in a short amount of time. And it was just this crazy wild ride. When I went in there, I started out, when I walked in the door, there were 4 employees doing tech support, and all of support operations. And then when I left 3 years later, I had over 1,000 employees reporting directly into me. And so wow. I was, needless to say, I did a phenomenal job at scaling. And I, also hit it, which was great on a startup, that went out the gate, and it had a, $1 billion IPO, which was unusual. And I just said, like, I'm done. I'm never doing this ever again. And I went to culinary school. And I, pursued a career in chefing. I did like my stage in Italy. There was no looking back. I said, I did that famous Sean Connery, like never again. I will never play James Bond ever again. And then my co-founder, who also worked with me at NetZero, went to a Bitcoin conference and came home, was like, oh my God, this technology, you got to look at it. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. Don't need it. Don't hear it. And like super excited and really wanting to share. Come on, you got to look. And I'm like, okay, fine. Send me some stuff. And I'm, reading the Bitcoin white paper. And I'm just like shaking my head. And I'm just like cursing. And I'm just like, SOB, F. And he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh, no, nothing's wrong. You're absolutely right. This is going to be the next internet. We did the internet. This is going to be the next thing. And I swore to God, I would never do this again. And now we're going to do this again, aren't we?
Let me ask you real quick. What did NetZero have that I want to make sure I understand that? Were they free and they made money on ads, and that was the reason people shifted in? Industry standard at the time was. And what were they doing again? They were like a
$30 a month. It was $30 a month for dial-up, right? I mean, that's what AOL was charging, which is a lot at the time. Your phone bills were like $10, $15, right? People don't realize that. So like, it was incredibly expensive to be on the internet. And so, these guys' idea was that it would be ad supported. So what they did was they ran a banner bar that you as the customer could move, but they had a banner at the bottom, kind of like how news now has that ticker at the bottom, right? When you're watching, TV news, and you could move it either from the bottom or up to the top, but either way it was running. And they had like huge ad sales with, Best Buy, Victoria's Secret, General Motors, they just went and got huge ad sales. And as a result, we were able to give the internet away for free. And then we focused on, going into more rural areas of America where the titans of industry like Microsoft and AOL just weren't covering, and we went and got that covered. And so we believe that the internet, it was a mission of like equal access for all, that everyone, no matter where they are, should have, free access to the internet. And so that was a game changer at the time.
What do you think of that model now? What would you say? What percentage of people who access the internet do it for free through that ad model?
Oh, I mean, that's still going on. I mean, the last last I checked, it was still a significant portion. And the other thing was at the time, though, is that of course these other providers have taken the cost down, but that was for dial-up only. And now a lot of people that, have it are on, bigger networks. Dial-up's no longer used, but dial-up is still like a big deal in rural areas, and still being used because they don't have the alternative of, cable, et cetera. But most people have moved on to higher speed, higher access networks that they're then paying for. And I haven't tracked it. I don't know that anybody has, tried to figure out that. I mean, I know that NetZero does do it, and still to this day has ad supported, and they also offer the high speed. But yeah, I haven't followed that. I've moved on. When I said I left. I left. I was like, I don't even want to support my printer. Like, I don't want to know how to fix my toner at that point, kind of like walking away. But yeah, I mean, at the time it was a groundbreaking model to have the advertisers pay for it. So I think it's one of those things where it's just morphed off of what television is, right? Like television today, you've got, your ad supported, CBS, ABC, et cetera. We're all getting those for free. But then you've got your higher end programming like, HBO or Showtime. And then you've also got Hulu, which markets all of that stuff. And you can get, pay access for that and get a little bit of all of them.
Interesting. And were you a stockholder early on? I imagine you had a very comfortable exit where you didn't have to work again, like in the millions of dollars. And
so then 100% on the money. So I went in, I was, Justin, who is my co-founder in this, was industry hire number one. And he was out building networks for, big firms. Like he was actually, designing and building out the internet as we know it, the commercial internet that exists today. He was the, one of many. He was not Al Gore, and he did not build, he did not create the internet, but he was actually out building, real person going out and building the internet. And then I was running support operations. And so I was industry hire number two at the company. So yeah, I had a successful exit, and then, didn't technically need to work anymore. So I always loved cooking. I always loved feeding people, but it was a lot, right? Like I didn't know, it wasn't easy to scale. Like I know how to scale tech, right? But and scaling people, but like scaling in the kitchens, putting out a dinner for 4, easy. Putting out a dinner for 100 by myself, not so easy. So it was like, you know what? I'm going to go to culinary school. And I got to, travel the world. I took, I went and took classes in like Japan and Korea. I did my stage in Italy. I worked at a Michelin star restaurant, here in Los Angeles, and one of the initial slow food restaurants when that was, birthing in LA. So it was super cool. A lot of fun. Crazy.
And you were doing that completely for fun. You just worked at a restaurant because you wanted to.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Super
fascinating.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, chefs love when you say you'll work for free and you're a hard worker and show up on the daily. And it was an amazing experience.
What do you get out of it when you don't have to work, you made millions from this deal, you go into a restaurant and say, hey, can I work for free? What's going through your head, or how do you feel about it?
So I think it's interesting. A lot of people who retired from the internet 1.0 wound up going to culinary school and becoming chefs. Like a lot of the original people that I know
Hmm.
are actually chefs and went into that. So I think it's right. Like there is at the time when we were building the internet, and even if you think about it, like when Twitter was first starting, they were like crashing, going out, right? So everybody who is the early builders, it's all about building the house, right? Building the house, building the foundation and building the house. And at times, random fires break out, like actual fires. So the house is burning down on
Mm.
one side, but we've got to keep building it on the other side, right? And so there's that constant rush, of adrenaline. And I think it's why some people take up, these extreme sports. And if you're in a kitchen and like all of these customers come in at once and it's fire and you see it on TV and that's actually real, it gets bananas in a kitchen. And it really is about how fast can you move to put out the best food you possibly can to perfection in a short amount of time and all collaborating together without knocking into each other, scalding each other, cutting off your finger, all of these things. And so it was to me at least, a very similar adrenaline rush to move
Mm.
from, tech ops over to working in a kitchen. And then the collaboration is also awesome when you're really building something, right? Like we're all working together and brainstorming and figuring it out. So one of the things I loved, I worked at a restaurant called The House, which was Scooter Kampfer was one of the first chefs for the slow food movement. And one of the things we did on Sunday was the senior chefs, myself included. So it was her, the exec chef, myself, and another person who also worked there for free, which funnily enough was Jerry Ryan, who plays Seven of Nine at Star Trek. So she's a
Oh yeah.
famous Hollywood actress who also was chefing in that kitchen and donating her time
Wow.
for free. So people who like have intense jobs, crazy jobs, I think we also do like intense hobbies, adrenaline style hobbies. So the four of us would go to the farmer's market in the morning on Sundays and just all go in different directions and think about things we like. And then we would all meet in the center because it was just like a T, or a cross rather.
Mm.
Meet in the center and just be like, what did you see? What did you see? Oh, this, that, the other. It's like, okay, now we know what we'll grab. And we would go back, grab everything. We would lay it out on this big, long table in the dining room and literally make up the menu on the fly based on what we had bought. And so on Sundays, if you were coming to the restaurant and had a reservation, you had no idea what you were going to get served. You would eat what we put in front of you. It was served family style, so you were sitting with strangers. So all these things were just like weird and different, now normalized because the slow food movement grew and grew, and now you go into restaurants and there's these long tables where, you're sitting with other people and stuff. But at the time, it was really new, wild, interesting. And so, yeah, so we created the menus on Sundays at like, 8 o'clock in the morning and then just started measing out, and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. That sounds to me like it's a more creative process on the restaurateur side. You're being more creative in the menu processing. I imagine there's more volatility, right? If there's not the kind of food or if the menu is challenging, but there's also the camaraderie or the community aspect that is difficult to process. It's difficult when you think about a business. Generally, you think about, okay, we're going to do this new thing, but then we're going to process control it so we can do it over and over and over again and optimize it and make it really efficient. And that's how you get factory farm food and you get fast food and Starbucks that it tastes the exact same every time, all day long, 365. And there's a successful business model in that, but it's almost like if you flipped it entirely, if you didn't even play that game, that's also successful business. Is that growing? Are there more of these? I haven't even been to one of them, but are the number of restaurants that are doing this slow food technique growing more
Oh,
so than the average? Is that
yes,
right? Yeah.
there's always going to be, so, fast, easy, quick is always going to be, popular, especially, in America to Americans, right? But what you'll notice is, we went from having McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Pizza Hut to now having things that are still fast, but that are, there's, more variety there, like a Chipotle, and places like that, where the menu, even though it's still fast food, has started to upgrade, and you're getting, fresh avocados and, healthier meals. So that slow food movement changed the game of, like, not only slow food, where, you're coming up with menus on the fly, no one knows what's happening that day, but it also directly impacted the fast food industry, because they saw, business tapering off or not growing as much as it used to. And so they then had to innovate. And that area was, ripe for innovations. And so you're seeing, like, smaller chains that can, to what I call, McMacking, right? They can McMackify the business, but still have, like, a wider variety of choice, healthier foods, keep it interesting, change menus out. Menus didn't ever change, really, right? But now you're seeing they'll have, like, a month of this or a month of that. And so that kind of, things, I think, where there's innovation on one side of the industry, it always winds up impacting, innovation on the other side, or inspiring innovation on the other side. So if you
Totally.
think about
Totally.
it, it's a lot cooler, like ramen's all over the place now, like
Yeah.
there's, but I mean, back in the day, sushi was weird. Like, I grew up, my first restaurant job as a kid was being, like, a busser in a sushi restaurant. And Americans were like, what the
Yeah.
hell is
Unusual.
this? Right? Like, super unusual. And now, like, everybody by and large eats sushi. And so we keep, food keeps innovating, which is super, cool. And now, and we're always discovering, in the US, we're discovering things that are elsewhere that are commonplace, but that, we don't know anything about. So, like, right now,
Hmm.
chefs in the past year, like, chefs have been huge about, like, Aleppo pepper, and how they
Mm.
really love how Aleppo pepper tastes, as a finishing pepper, rather than black pepper. It's not as in your face. It's just different, right? And so, like, there's all these fads that come and go. Cupcakes were a big thing, right? The
Mm.
cronut.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
super interesting.
Interesting.
It's
And,
it's a place where
and
there's
what?
always innovation.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's really, I think of it as a creative and artistic domain. So inherently, it feels like it can't be solved. Yeah, there's always going to be a new frontier. And I want to ask you about this in contrast to the business that you started, because this I think of as kind of like almost the rote opposite, where it's a problem that if you can solve it, it helps the crypto industry flourish. But it's a I don't know if I want to use the word straightforward, but it's an obvious problem that I'm sure you saw early on, which was probably the reason why you got into Netki, saying, hey, identity, KYC, understanding people is going to be a big problem. Did this grip you in a way where you felt like, hey, I'm going to put all the cooking stuff aside and go and build up the tech team here? Like, what motivated you early on with the business model to say, this is something I want to jump back into and dedicate
Right.
yourself? Or was it part-time, and did you put money into it, and like, how did you sort of grow it?
Um, Went full time and put money into it. And I think your questions are great. I think that when you're building initially in the tech space, things are super creative. Like, what I always tell people, and I've always said, is I'm a builder. When I was working at NetZero, when I made the decision to leave, I had innovated. I created the, like, first email autoresponder. Not my fault that they're terrible today, and not my fault that knowledge bases are terrible today. Ours were really good, right? But I figured out that word proximity could tell people what was wrong, right? If they're going to say email and broken, or email and not sending, that means that their email is broken and not sending. So we can do an automated response and have, like, a 90% plus success rate on it being resolved correctly the first time without human interaction. So that's super creative, right? Like, super creative, developing, what was at the time one of a kind technology. Where I get really bored is when all that creativity is done and you're just like clocking in, handling the same tickets every day, it's basically been solved, and now it's maintaining. So I'm definitely not a maintainer. I'm a builder. And so what really excited me about the space early on was like, we are early days and no one knows what's going to happen. And somebody's going to need to figure out, like, we made a conscious decision as a team that we weren't going to look at what Bitcoin, or crypto or the blockchain in of itself could solve. What we were going to look at was what hardships and what problems is this technology going to encounter, and how do we solve for that? Because that's where our expertise lied at NetZero. Was where were the problems, right? Support operations is a problem. It's too expensive. Having somebody wait on the phone 45 minutes to get to a tech person who's going to tell them the same thing that everybody else knew 100 times over, right? That's inefficient. It's ugly for the customer. It's not great for the support rep either. Like, no one enjoys that. So why are we doing it, right? So innovate and make the experience better. The same thing with, crypto. And so when I was looking at it, it's like, okay, so we said that the internet should be open for all. We believe that Bitcoin should be open for all. Okay. So with the internet, the problem was it was too costly, and there isn't, and we needed to make sure that people were focusing on the connectivity in rural areas so that everybody could have, equal access to the information that the internet was going to bring. Well, with, Bitcoin, if you think about it, people say that it's for everyone. True. But then why are all the apps written in English? Is English the only language in the entire world? And why, if you're going to KYC somebody, are all the, KYC data sets that all the technology is being trained on, why are they just young white American men? And they are young white American men because they were the techs writing the software initially, right? So it's their data sets, of course. But if you want to be truly inclusive, right, you've got to look at things and think about where are these problems going to come in. So, one of the things that exists is that most of the KYC providers say they are global. And that is 100% factually correct. They are global. But they're global because they take the passport. And the passports are written in English. And do people without money who really need Bitcoin, who want to circumvent the Western Unions of the world and the MoneyGrams of the world so they can get more money and remittance back to their families wherever they come from, do they have passports? Do they have, does everybody in country, right, to accept it have a passport? No. But they have a national ID, but that national ID is written in Russian. It's written in Mandarin. It's written in, all these other languages. And so what we started out was, if we're truly going to be a global provider for KYC for Bitcoin, then we need to recognize every single ID, no matter what language it's written in. And we need to focus on that as these people are onboarding, understand they've never had bank accounts in their lives. They haven't, taken, right? We're used to, you take a photo of a check. Now, even that's becoming, nobody does that anymore, but right, you know how to do it. But, they don't know how to take a photo of their ID. They've never done it before. They might not know how to take a selfie. So we went and wrote everything in their language, and not just Google can do a translate, you can throw, do just translation. But if you think about it, when, what was it? The investors, when everybody was going into the token sales and accredited investors, there's a term called private party, that you are a registered private party. Well, if you let the translation software in app do that, it's going to say, you are Fiesta Privada. No, that's not what you are. Right. You are not a Fiesta Privada. Yeah. And so we went and got we hired, Hollywood does amazing, right? With their movies, they do amazing translations because they've got to go and take turns of phrase like we do cat out of the bag. Well, that might not mean
Hmm.
anything in Spanish if you
Of
translate it
course.
literally.
Yeah.
You've got to find those, those translations where they have their turn of phrases and turn it into that. And so we specifically went and said, okay, that's going to be a problem. So let's make sure we're actually talking to people globally. Let's make sure we actually can onboard people globally. So that's what was really exciting to me, was that it was still mission driven. I like my work to be mission driven. Feeding people is mission driven, but like with the
Mm.
technology, NetZero was creating, access for everyone on the internet. And with, Netki, we're trying to create equal access for everyone, no matter where they are in the world. So like our slogan that I came up with is all faces from all places, and
And
that really
why?
sums it up.
Yeah, I'm curious why. I see this less about some sort of moral proposition of inclusivity and more about just general business acquisition and incentives here. When other companies are not having proper translations, it's nice to say we want to be inclusive because it's good for people and it's the right thing to do. But it's also just better for the business, and you have an incentive to have more customers if you can have a proper translation.
Oh,
Why is this something that is foundational to the differentiation of Netki and that other companies refuse to do or is hard to do in some way, and they still lag behind?
I
Or
think so. So I
where are
think
we today?
a lot. That's a great question. A lot of the KYC companies are providing support to banks, right? That's who handled all the money before. And we don't have to KYC to get on Facebook, right? Where do we need to go through this kind of thing? It's with the banks. And so the KYC companies that are out there are very particularly regional and not global. So you'll find a,
Mm.
KYC provider that is in, Latin America, that covers 3 countries in Latin America, and that's what they focus on. And it's for the banks. With us, like one of the things about so yes, from a practical matter, right? You would be smart to want to care about that if you indeed are global, and who your client base is. The other thing, that we realized, and it was a discovery, is like we partnered with Bit early on, and Bit was way early in the space out of Barbados. And Gabriel Abad, who was the founder, who's now become the ambassador to the UAE. His issue was that the people were not getting recognized. The Barbadian people, when they were taking their selfies, it wasn't recognizing, that they were people,
Okay,
and being able
yeah.
to
So it's
map it
more
back,
than just
right?
a
And be able
yeah,
to
more
map
than
it
just a
back.
language.
Yeah, so you and I are relatively easy, although I'm getting older and I'm a woman. But like, like people who were outside of those normal, how those data sets were programmed. And it's still a problem to this day. Like every single year, there is a news article about KYC and facial recognition, and how the biggest providers, like Facebook, like Apple, et cetera, are failing to do a great job at it. And the thing is that you've got to actually like care enough to go and fix it and pay attention. And so we did, because we wanted to be a good provider for Bit. So we worked it out and just fixed and edited and worked on updating and honing that technology, so that we've got like really high recognition rates on all the
For
users, no matter
facial
what.
recognition.
Yeah. Because you want to map, because what we want to do is, right, we've got to make sure that you're you and I'm me. If I get a hold, like if
Hmm.
you worked for me, right, I take a photo of your ID. Like that's part of the process in the United States. Like the employer takes a photo of both sides of your ID when I think you're filling out, what is it, an I-9, I think, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
legally obligated to do that. Well, now I've got a photo of you, I turn around and try to, pretend to be you. We've got to be able to map that my face doesn't map to the face on your ID, kind of thing. So it's
Interesting.
really cool. It's
And
super interesting. Yeah.
how would this be measured? Like if there were to be an open critique of Facebook or Apple, is it the percentage of success rates on facial recognition based on the gender, age, and pigmentation of the
Yeah.
skin? I mean, are those the kind of quantitative assessments you'd
Hundred
put forth?
percent. So it's the National Institute of Science and Technology in the United States that does this report, and they come out with it every year, and they're really clear about like what's succeeding, what's failing, etc. But like I think, and I don't want to misstate, but I believe that like last year, one of them actually just withdrew their data set and said, you know what, we're not going to be evaluated anymore. Thanks, no thanks.
Do they feel it wasn't a fair evaluation?
No, I mean, who knows? I mean, like I have no idea why they pulled it. They just didn't submit it, kind of thing. And it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. If you're, in the space, right? If your target clients are, wealthy people all have passports. But if you're going into someplace else and have your focus, be it, that information is out there. Like you can look up like, percentage of people that have passports by country, and you'll see it. Like even in the US, the number of people that have passports isn't that high. Like that's shocking to me. I was like, whoa, because I have one. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
It's not as great as people think it is.
I would even expect we're probably far less than average, just because geographically we're very isolated, as opposed to European or South Asian countries.
And we're huge. Like a lot of people have seen America, like they've seen the United States and traveled, right? But if you do that, you just need your driver's license to get on a plane or drive around, right? Like we don't need a passport, until we're going someplace of distance, So
yeah,
you're correct.
And do you think there will be? Do you see us moving towards a more centralized system of identity, either on chain or off chain, in some international coalition of database identity management? Like I've noticed there's more of the, as I've flown inbound back to the United States in the airports, I've noticed more of these kind of like, just stand there and it scans your eyeballs and scans your face. And it's like, oh, Michael, and here you are. And the technology seems to be, encroaching for sure. I think China probably leads this, where they have like, they'll do facial recognition at a convenience store and everywhere you go. And at least in the United States, the government just seems to do it when we're at TSA and border security coming in or out of the country. Do you see this continuing to creep, where there'll be mandates that the government takes the data that you guys collect, if they're not already doing that, or they're somehow reaching further and further into the domains of identification? And then if you do, I'm curious the role that like crypto would play, possibly, resisting that.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. So one of the things that really flips people and they're like, oh, I didn't realize, right, is that both my co-founder and myself, do KYC and identity. And at the same time, we are huge advocates for having self-sovereign digital identity. We are huge advocates that there should not at all be these huge warehouses of data. We are huge proponents that you should not be required to submit, and that these companies should not be required to keep all of your information, because there's data breaches all over the place. How many times have your identity been stolen? It's over 10, well over 10 at this point that my identity has been stolen. So, fun fact, we went and actually protested, and I was dressed as the Statue of Liberty, green face paint and all. And my co-founder was dressed as Uncle Sam, and he had me in chains. And it was about when it found out that the Americans, like that all of our emails, et cetera, with the PRISM program, that they had access to
Edward Snowden,
everything that we didn't know, right, with Edward Snowden. And it was about Restore the Fourth. And they, all, of course, the media, ABC, CBS, NBC, they love to go and talk to the crazy people that are, in costume. And what they didn't expect was to get the two of us that were incredibly articulate and knew our stuff and were able to cite laws and legislation, and and so it was really great. So what I'm really hoping is that we go towards where Europe is heading and what their thoughts are about it, that every single one of us should have the right to be forgotten, that every single one of us should not have to share all of our data, like all of our data, and that it shouldn't be auto saved. Like if you think about it, right? Like if easy one that everybody can understand, right? If you're, walking into a bar, you've got to turn over your ID to prove that you're 21. Well, if that person's got a great memory, they now know where you live.
Mm-hmm.
They now know your home address and what business is it of theirs. But that's in the view when they go to look down to check. Okay, let me check that you're you, and let me check that you're
Right.
over 21. But that other data that they get is none of their business.
Right.
And there's places like Amazon, right? Like, I mean, I love the convenience of Amazon Prime, but they've got my address, they've got my credit card, they've got the expiration date, they've got the security code. So if you want that one click comes at a cost. And the cost of that one click is that they're storing your code, your security code, which is the one thing. Like somebody who's got your credit card, right? They don't have the other pieces of it. Okay, worthless. But I know that like I personally got hit by the Target hack because I had shopped at Target and they had all of my information, and then somebody went and grabbed it and went off to the races. So I really like the idea that where the European Union is heading, that we all have the right to be forgotten, and then specifically with the technology that this industry has now, to have like self-sovereign digital identity where we have various attestations. So if I'm going to your business and you say, okay, Dawn, you need to provide me with your first and last name and your date of birth, I can say yes or no to that. But if I say, okay, those are the only two things I'm sending you, and you're not getting my social, and you're not getting my
Right.
address, and my height,
Right.
my weight, and all this other stuff. So what I believe we can do, but regulation needs to catch up, and regulators need to catch up, is that all of this is possible and can be solved for, but you've got to change the regulations to allow it. And I see that the EU, not that they're perfect, but their governments are understanding it and want to protect the individual and our sovereign rights. And so I hope to see the rest of the globe follow that mindset, rather than the fact that all of these corporate entities basically own our data and can sell our data, and just change that whole thing. So yeah, so like
Would
we
you
don't.
describe, yeah, would you describe the European attitude as being, in contrast to the US, as being more? I'm curious to sort of dissect the big picture parallels between what are they leading exactly, and
Okay,
what's the
yeah,
commonalities between where they're leading. So I think of it as they seem to be, in many ways, leading this charge for individual freedom, which when I think about it, it doesn't really resonate with my anecdotal experiences of the contrast between the US and Europe. I generally think of Europe as being more collectivist. They're physically closer together, so they influence each other more. They benefit. They have the euro. They have other shared programs. In the United States, it seems like there's a big emphasis on individual freedoms and rights, but there's also corporate freedoms and rights. So if I give my credit card to Amazon, if I willingly give my information to these companies, then they can do what they want. And so we value that as well, which is kind of the center of the debate between the Facebook the trials, I guess, or the hearings, where it's like, should Facebook and Instagram be governed? Should Twitter be governed? And there's a strong resistance against that because they are private companies, so they should be allowed to do what they want. And we can debate at what level do they sort of become a utility and a shared good. And that's kind of the center of the debate, in my understanding. Do you feel that the Europe has this attitude that's like, how do you sort of compare the two, the European versus the United States attitude? Because they are I don't know if it's ahead or behind, but they're certainly placing greater emphasis on different directional structures, you call them.
Yeah, for sure. So, if you think about it, right, that's the mindset. Like Americans love this mindset or thought that we're so free. But, your choices, right? That if you want to shop at Amazon remotely or do XYZ thing, yes, you're willfully doing it, but you're doing it for a convenience and you're not necessarily thrilled at it. Like one of the things that I go and say, like, okay, I go scuba diving. Okay. And when I go
Yeah.
scuba diving, no matter where I am, no matter what country I am in, I am signing a waiver that says if they mess up, that the vendor, if they mess up, if they cause me to die, I'm letting them off the hook, and I will say, okay, I'm accepting that they can be willfully negligent. I'm signing off that they can be willfully negligent, and then I have no recourse, and they won't let you dive unless you sign away. Hey, man, we could literally put have
Kill you.
we can have nothing in your tank. We could fill it with whatever gas that's gonna kill you, and you can't sue us. But so yes, am I signing that waiver, and am I getting into that contract because I want to dive? Yes, but is that okay? Because otherwise I can't dive. And so there became this thing, and it's in the US, it's everywhere, by and large, right? Where there used to be some sense of, corporate responsibility, that if an accident, because I used to work at a law firm too. I used to work at law firms and do their technical stuff on the back end. And so, back in the day before corporations became people, right? There was that you expected a corporation to act with somewhat level of integrity. So negligence, okay, a customer tripped on a bump in the rug, right? The restaurant did not intentionally put the bump in the rug there. It just happened that the rug over time folded and it happened. But that's not willful negligence. But excusing willful negligence and having to sign off on willful negligence, right? Is that really okay? But what in America we say is, oh, but they have the choice. Oh, but you have the choice. You can choose not to dive. You could not to do things. And so,
do you feel like is that? But is that? Are you implying there that that it's because every scuba diving school does this, that it's like, well, if you want to scuba dive, there is no distribution of options. It's not like some companies charge more, but they take lower liability, and some vice versa. It's like that's just kind of industry standard.
That's why I use it as a good example, because everybody does it. So your choices are that you don't dive. Either you don't dive or you sign that waiver. And so, where the EU is going in, there's smart governance and not smart governance. There's governance overreach for sure, right? But where the EU is going, with regards to identity, is more controlled, in that every company under the sun should not be asking all of their clients for all of this information that they don't need to operate their business, but that they can then use to resell later to make money off of, And so, and that's where a lot of these self-sovereign, digital identity places are going, is that we need to be able to parse out that data. So that if you think about it, why does anybody care about what year you were born, right? I mean, we gave an example, right? They, at the bar, we have to care about what year you're born.
Right.
But other than that, where do we really need to care about, what year you're born, and where does anything, come into play? What do you really need to give your information out for? So I like a lot of these companies that are coming out with Craig Sellers, who's a long time, OG, did Tether. he announced that, he's coming out with Self, which I like the name too, and they're going to do Self, which is going to be a self-sovereign digital identity. And I think that's, I would like to see that be a future where we all have more control in that way. And we see less of the grab either by corporations or by government. There's banking laws. Banking laws haven't been updated, or that's, well, not that they haven't been updated, they have. But, back in the day where there was the requirements to have like all of this stuff on file and all of it centralized, et cetera, was because like, I'll out myself. I'm old enough that when my bank account got created, it was on an index card, handwritten.
Oh, wow, really?
Handwritten by the bank teller, looking at my ID, right? Huh. And then I signed it, and so you couldn't yeah, I'm old enough, right? So if I went to do anything at a different branch, they didn't have that card on file. They would actually have to call my local branch that had the card on file and talk to somebody there. And so you literally were banking at your little branch, because even the other branches that your bank would have wouldn't know who you are. So, I mean, things have come a long way. So I think government has always been historically slow, and they need to just catch up, right? As technology develops, they're always behind. So one of the things they wanted to do early days, just to get how they're behind, right? In early days, spam was a problem for individuals because you had to pay for your phone bill, right? And if you went to go download your mail, you were connected. That was charging. And then you find out that this is all this spam. So the US Congress, their solution was, what we're going to do? We're going to force every ISP to KYC every single individual. We're going to not let anybody on the internet be anonymous, and everybody's going to have to be first name dot last name at provider.com. So I would have to be Dawn Newton at AOL.com.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, no. You got to be kidding me. Absolutely not. No way. There's other ways to combat spam. So it was a matter of the technologist, which this was, my co-founder, Justin, was one of the ones that went to speak to Congress to say no. You do not want to solve this way.
How influential do you think he was there? It was that sometimes I look at these terrible proposals in government and feel helpless. Was he particularly influential because he was in person, or he had accomplished what he was, or were his thoughts and ideas just so well put that they were effective? Or was it kind of, there was a massive momentum of other people? How do you view, I'm really interested in how people can organize or self-organize to actually have their voices heard and make a change on regulation.
I think that's a great question. And I don't have the greatest answer now because sadly our environment has changed. But there's hope. I will say that, right? Mm-hmm. So he went in as an individual person. He was the public policy director for the ISPC, which was the Internet Service Providers Consortium. He asked for a meeting and he got it. Okay, so that's step one. I will tell you a counter story in a bit, right? That's step one. He just asked for a meeting and he got it. It was with one of the senators that had proposed the bill, and went and, talked to him and said, this is terrible. You're going to put the internet out of business, because back then KYC was not cheap. You're talking about $250 a price tag. That wouldn't have even been a great model for AOL or Microsoft. It would have crippled internet development in the US as we know it. And so, but their hearts were in the right place. They wanted to, people were getting $400 phone bills when normally your phone bill was $15 to $20. So they wanted to service and help Americans out, but they had the wrong way to solve it. So he told them, listen, give us some time, give us a little breathing room. We'll figure it out. And, we'll get back to you. And then they asked him if he could substitute language in the law that would take care of it. And he did. And they accepted it, word for word. Wow. And so it was, it was really this sense of cooperation. Now, I will say, Justin has built three three unicorn IPOs in Los Angeles, in specifically our region. And, Ben Sherman is our rep. I think everybody in the space knows Ben Sherman's thoughts on, Bitcoin and, crypto
What
as a
are her
whole.
thoughts? And
Yeah.
who is he again? He's
But
the
Ben Sherman is our rep. He's a U.S. House of Representatives for our district. Now
okay.
Justin's spoken to Congress, has a history of working with Congress on bills for the early internet. He's in this district in particular created three, unicorns, which have employed, people in this district, and made money for this district. And he struggled to get a meeting.
And
Who
what's
are
the
all
attitude generally of the yeah. Do you see a sway on politicians do you think the trend now is politicians in the US at least are becoming more open and desiring to integrate crypto and Bitcoin or vice versa?
I do. If you think about it and look back, and that's one of the projects I'm starting, I've been asking, and I've asked this on Twitter a couple of times over, and I still want to keep going and going and keep asking to get more and more response. Is like, we should know who is, pro crypto in government and who is pro crypto that is running, because like November is coming, right? And we should understand, like, I don't want to see the United States get left behind on this, on this wave of innovation, because we did a great job, with the internet and, with all the socials and stuff, right? It's been great for the US, for the economy, for everything else. And so it would be great to see. I do think people are trending as they learn more, and especially as representatives who understand it are, taking the mic or being, given the mic and being incredibly articulate and really not talking in geek speak, but really speaking in very, plain English about, what it is. I think, and we're seeing it on both sides of the aisle, right? We're seeing Democrats go for it. We're seeing Republicans go for it. We're seeing it go not just at the federal level, but we're seeing states go for it. I would like to see the U.S. have a broader outlook for it and be providing, clarity. But I also appreciate, like California got cars updated because California was a big buyer of cars, right? So California led on that, in the past. We can see, states lead on this. We saw marijuana, right? Marijuana by and large is now legal everywhere, but we still didn't get it at the federal level. People were trying to get it at the federal level, said, well, that's not working. So got California, do medical marijuana, then turned it around just for recreational use. Then all these other states went and saw, ooh,
Right.
well, there's money to be had there. Like, that's like lottery money. Let's go, right? And so to your point earlier, right, there's the mission of doing good, right? So to me, like, everybody should be able to, smoke marijuana, legally, et cetera. So that's the mission of doing good. But the decision makers needed to understand and have, for them, it was like a cost benefit analysis, right? When you go right down to it, they realize, ooh, more money for our state. And, oh, this isn't the scary, harmful thing that we were told as kids, right? Because all the boomers were told that, like, it's a gateway drug, it's highly addictive, no.
Yeah.
That was all just,
Yeah.
So I think education, around it. And then to your point earlier, they need to understand that it's, it's economically sound and is the right decision, for the country, not just for, doing good for the sake of doing good, but that it actually is a net positive. And I think sadly, right, that's where things go, all the time. That's just how the world works.
What do? They go towards net positive, you're saying?
They want to go to net positive, right? Like they want to see, right?
Right.
In the old days, right? I mean, a lot of boomers, right? And I mean, if you think about it, most of the people in political office in the US are boomer, right? And they
You're very old.
right. They're really old. I'm the generation, I'm Gen X right underneath them, but like I was taught by them. So even I had it, like I got told that like, marijuana was like the devil's lettuce. And it would make you go insane. Right. I mean, it was basically told that you were told that if you like smoked pot, it was like, you like would lose your mind. You would be in a mental institution.
Yeah.
You would literally go crazy. You would be an instant addict. All this like just misinformation. Which, but by and large, the American people believed. And so it
Yeah.
was vilified. And now, you've got most of this. What are we? I mean, we're high up. I think it's in the 30s, if not the 40s now that marijuana is legal in. Like
Yeah, well, I think it's a broader trend too. I think I think it's overall. I think that the real energetic momentum is people's recognition that there is a massive existential threat in the mental health illnesses that people are experiencing, and that could be expressed by deaths by overdose, mass shootings, suicides, depression. And these things are largely correlated to, although I personally don't believe they're caused by painkillers and other over-the-counter or prescribed drug medications. But there seems to be like almost like a deep unease across society, and I see marijuana, psilocybin. Actually, in Oregon, where I am, psilocybin is now approved for psychedelic treatment and therapy. Ketamine, MDMA, like the things are really moving across the board. And I think this is the kind of thing, like maybe one thought I've had on this, curious to hear your reaction to this, is that I almost imagine if you took all the stars in the universe and all the planets out there, and you said, what would be the type of ways that intelligent life and societies would evolve? And I think that there's some physical constraints on this. You have like the size of the Earth, right? You have the number of joules, energy hitting the Earth. So there's like energy capture potential. There's what we have on the Earth, and then there's what we can do with the material that we have. We can manipulate it in different ways. So you need like, this is kind of I'm like running up to this, right? But you have all these different you have like Earth it's fertile because we have lithium and ion and all these different types of complex metals and materials. So it sparks life. However, I don't know exactly how that happens, but we come to this point where societies are getting increasingly advanced. And as they become advanced, there's different, like fire, the wheel, technology, communication. These things they're not like, we didn't just happen to lay wires down and have telegraphs and lay telephone wires. Like these things they're fundamental to, I think, how any network is built. You can look at bees, you can look at moles underground. Like if you look at the early railroad maps of the United States, like it's congregated on the east side because that's where the people came over from Europe. But then it just like spider webs out in this pattern of like, originally it was how far a horse could travel in one day. So that was the distance that like every city was developed. And then I think there's increasingly more technologically advanced checkpoints that are reached. And I think one of them is the use of psychedelic medicine. And if it's not balanced by the explosion in technology, which we experienced from, mid 80s to where we are today, the technology can be like overwhelming for people. We can become hyper connected. And I tend to think like there's naturally occurring balancing energies and technology, you could say. And I think psychedelics and the use of those in a intentional way kind of serves as like a naturally it just exists the way it is, but it balances out the hyper connected technological tools that we're developing. And I think the stagnation from the 70s, where Nixon's war on drugs and said, okay, no, there's no more psychedelic research, has kind of created this like reservoir of potential, and that has kind of starved people of like ways to handle their life in a meaningful way. Like if you go to school to be a psychiatrist today in Western, at least in America, the primary focus of your education is on the various ways the pharmaceutical drugs interact. Like that's, if you're coming out of a psychiatry degree, that's what you understand. And that to me doesn't seem pointed at the right way to solve the problems that people are facing of mental illness and psychological distress. So I tend to think about crypto and the development of the decentralized technology as in lieu of this, like part of this process. So it's like consolidation and then decentralization. So the internet like connects everyone, and then everyone gets super connected, and then we decentralize it with this decentralizing technology. And I tend to think that it's part of a this is a little bit, this is beyond observation, this is more speculation, but I would imagine that as technology evolves on all the other planets, in theory that there are out there, that it looks very similar, that there's like a method of communication between everyone across the globe, and then you have this propagation of like decentralized databases to ensure the integrity and privacy and all the other capabilities that we're talking about. But that's like my high level theory on the world and its evolution.
No, thank you for sharing that. That was super cool. I mean, I think that
Did that make any sense?
No, absolutely it did. Absolutely it did. And if you see, to your thing, right? Like when you're talking about the railroad and the expansion, and if we do go out and think that, there are other worlds out there that are, supporting, sentient life, and NASA is, sharing all of this stuff with us, it's like whether we're conscious of it or not, we tend to make reality what sci-fi authors dream in their heads.
Yeah.
Think not. I think it is totally on point that the first StarTech phone that Motorola came out with flipped, just like the original Star Trek communicator.
Oh, yeah.
It like looked identical. And we do tend to, whether we know it or not, I don't know that any of us are going and saying like, oh my God, yes, let's develop the tricorder, that Bones had, but there is this, the creatives, because you were talking about that, the creative side versus the practical side, right? The creative side always imagines, a bright or dystopian, future. And then society goes and manifests that, as a whole. Like if you had said to me, back in the early internet days that, people would be ordering cars from strangers, where we were taught stranger danger, kids, oh, people are going to try to get you to get in their car with candy, right? And then you're telling me, oh, you know what? 30 years from now, strangers are going to be in their homes, and they're going to use an app on their phone through the internet to have a stranger come to their own house that they don't know from a hole in the wall. And they're going to get in their car and let them drive them God only knows where.
Yeah.
And I would have told you, you're nuts. Like, not going to happen, right? So even people that built the early internet, we can vision out, right? Vision out email, no problem. Vision out like that kind of stuff. Like we saw what was 1-2 steps in front of us. We did not see what was, 20, 30 years later. Renting houses, Airbnb. What? You're going to fly somewhere and sit
that
in
one is
a stranger's home, and they're going to give you the keys to their house, like with a deposit of like a couple $100. Like,
well, let me ask you this: do you think it's possible to, hindsight 2020, obviously, but do you think it's possible to draw any? Is there a muscle to be built for seeing these patterns? Like, is it possible to have predicted? Granted, no one or not many people did, but and I often hear like even the best VCs will say, "Oh, we don't know. We just back smart people, and we don't know what ideas will work." And I want to believe that, but I'm like, well, is that it feels a little bit like giving up. It feels almost like, well, we don't know what works, what doesn't. Human beings are a giant unknown black box. But it doesn't really resonate with me. And I'm wondering, like, how do you feel about that? Is there?
I've got an actual real example, and it's something that my co-founder figured out a long time ago that never took out, that is now commonplace today. So he came up with the concept of private phone. And this is back in 2001. He figured this out, right? So it's 21 years ago. 2001, he came up with private phone, where we could do voice over IP. I could have a phone number that I gave out to anybody that I didn't care about, right? That's my phone number and it works and it's got a voicemail and I get it and it goes to email and nobody is none the wiser. But it didn't take off. People weren't ready for it. People couldn't. So I think there are people that for sure see the future. And I know some of them and they see exactly where things are going. But at the same time, your timing has to be right. Right. Because you've got to get, you've got to get the population to also agree with your vision and to adopt the technology. And so now Google Voice, everybody's got a Google Voice. Everybody's giving out their phone number and don't care because nobody's actually getting their cell phone number. You're not giving out your cell phone number to anybody by and large, right? You got the voice, and then you'll tell them once you vetted them, then they'll get your cell number, whatever. And so
just adding on to that, one thing that comes to mind is it's almost like to be able to have the right timing is not to say you need everybody in society at the same time. There's that crossing the chasm concept where if you can get I think it's 12% or 15% of people to adopt this, the early so is 10% of society ready for this is the question.
Right. And then who's got the better stuff, right? Like we've seen people talk about beta and VHS, right? All the time. Beta was the better tech, but VHS was what took off. And so they had better marketing. So that's where we made a choice that we liked the messaging as opposed to the actual tech. And the tech, anybody who actually, studies that and knows that is like, wow, Betamax is by far a superior tech, and we chose VHS. But they had great marketing. They had great branding. So there's that too. Like there's a whole bunch of things that come into, and what message resonates for people, right? What message resonates? Like we were talking about, marijuana, and still to this day, I have, boomer family members that are like, oh my gosh, it's so terrible. There's no, there is no reaching them. And oh my God, if you talked about psilocybin, they'd be clutching their pearls endlessly about it. But you've got to have, I agree with you though, in your mindset, right? That your mindset is that it's got to be about, you were saying, right? You've got to have the contract and the expand and the contract. And then it's got to be about the messaging of what are people willing to listen to, what risk they're going to take. And then to your point, there is mission, right? Like I do think that a lot of these, I'm a huge fan of maps. And John Gilmore, again, old school internet OG, with maps and, doing work with veterans. But I think that was very strategic with them, right? Because, the government politicians care about the veterans. You've got to care about the veterans if you're a politician, and they were really suffering from PTSD definitively. And so MAPS could go and ask the government, listen, we want to study this in particular. And that resonated. It was very strategic. And it was a do-good mission for sure, but they were strategic in their thinking of how to approach that with people who would be, by and large, very anti that as a whole. And now, to your point, right? You're starting to change. Hearts and minds are starting to change, and people are more and more accepting of it and realizing that the old school messaging that we got in the 70s and earlier was just incorrect. And people are willing and most people are willing to listen, and the people who aren't, well, then they don't have to participate. So I think that is huge, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are, if we do wind up seeking out new life and new civilizations. I would not be surprised, to your point, that they are, that they have some similarities with ours.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah. Where do you? So I want to tie you down on Netflix, Netki a little bit on where are things now? You've raised, it looks like about $3.5-4 million. How do you assess progress, traction so far? Either revenue or people, however you think about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, our big win that I love to tell people in the space is that we put 4 million people on the Bitcoin blockchain in 6 weeks. 4 million people. It was the country of El Salvador, the adults, they had a huge uptake. And then one of the companies that's partnered, they were allowed to share publicly. 2.5 million of them stayed active. That's a huge, that is astronomically a huge take rate, right? But I think that accomplishment, the reason why it had the stick and kept so many is because it was really speaking to them from a practical matter. Western Union, I can only speak like US, right? So if you're sending money from the United States to El Salvador and you send $100, Western Union takes 12. That's a lot. That's a lot. So you're sending, your family, $88. And if we go and send Bitcoin to them, we send 100 USD of Bitcoin, and then 100 USD of Bitcoin comes out the other side,
or close to it,
or close to it, right? Or close to it. Well, Chivo, the government app that we specifically work with, isn't charging, fees. And so,
they cover it.
So they're talking about, literally changing the face of the country. Right. And what I like to do, to your thing about, measurements. So, Singapore used to be a, very poor country, pre-internet, and their government, thank God, right? Their wise government leaders at the time said, oh my God, this internet is really going to be something. So we're going to spend money on infrastructure and education. And now if any business is thinking about, opening up an office in Asia or a presence in Asia, they think of two places, Hong Kong and Singapore. Yeah. So Singapore put itself on the map by going all in on this new technology, this new innovation, and they called it right. And so, what I would like to see is, so for us, right, that we are the first company that can say we put, 4 million people on the Bitcoin blockchain, and got them access to, Bitcoin. And I want to see other countries doing it. That would be the next thing, is like, what other countries, are going to do it and have a good impact on their citizens. So,
and have you, would you raise more venture capital? Is it, how many people work at the company, and can you say anything about revenue or traction?
We have about 20 people working at the company. So one of the things both my co-founder and I are great at is not just massive bodies. We are very strategic in how we scale teams. And it's why we were able to compete against giants like AOL and Microsoft and beat them, at their own game. So we would raise, I would say that we are ripe to raise around, right now, probably, and I, don't want to speak to specifics, but our phone, you say our phone's been ringing off the hook, but reality, email and Signal kind of thing, have been going. Yeah. Once we did that, I mean, we've already proved it can be done. And we got, and we did that in, we had to get that live. We weren't the first choice provider.
I imagine there's a RFP process, bidding process.
And so, there was a bidding process, and we lost. And then the other provider, failed on launch, and we came in as the emergency save. So we didn't have 3 months to build it. We had 6 weeks to build it. So it was an incredible run. So we've, really, really proven ourselves there. So we've got, a lot of VCs calling us, asking us, are you doing a round? How much are you, how much can we give you, kind of thing. And so it's a good place to be, especially with, what just happened, in the market, and we had heard that people were struggling to raise. That's not us, We've got to figure out what we want in the group.
And is the revenue model to charge company? I mean, El Salvador, I imagine, just writes a check per person that uses it. Is that generally the company? So the marketplace, the exchange will
Yep.
you'll charge them a couple dollars per screen,
Yeah.
something like
They
that.
go, yeah, they go and they pay us like a bundle, and depending on
Hmm.
how big they are, right? The bigger the buy, the bigger the bigger the discount, and they, pay us for a bundle. And then, to your point about innovation, like I can't speak to that, but I will say, like, President Bukele is really good about getting announcements out to the people. And it's going to be one of those things, like, stay tuned. He's not done yet when it comes to working on Bitcoin and
El
doing,
Salvador.
yeah, unique and interesting things for his country. He's not. That's all I
That's
can say. That's all I can say is
huh.
stay tuned. But he's got
So you're
some great
bullish
ideas.
on El Salvador.
Yes, for sure.
Awesome.
For sure. He's a really smart man, and they've got great people working on the team down there, to make
That's
things,
awesome.
a go. I mean, that stickiness
Yeah.
factor is just insane.
Maybe they're like the Singapore of the South America.
That's what I like
That'd be awesome.
down there. When I'm down there talking to the Latin America, media, I absolutely say that. Like, I want to see, like, he's already setting that layup. And I don't know, like, I have not personally met him, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's, like you said, right? People are looking at models and then reiterating and everything. If I think what his plan is, if I had to, guess, is he wants El Salvador with Bitcoin to be the Singapore of the internet. And it's an
Super smart.
incredibly smart
Yeah.
play. It's an incredibly smart
Yeah.
play,
Yeah. Agreed. Might as well, right? Go for it. What do you guys to
100%.
lose? I mean,
Yeah.
I agree. Cool. Don, where are you writing online or tweeting anything personally you want to throw out there?
I am. So my Twitter is just Dawn Emazin Mary Newton, on Twitter. And yeah, I
Hmm.
tweet about, crypto stuff. I tweet about building businesses. I tweet about, startups. One of the things that you were asking when we had started early, you said, I might ask you, like, early startup, like, builder questions. The one thing I would tell people is, like, fire faster.
That's what you,
You
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my takeaway is that you need, when you are scaling and you are going to have that hockey stick moment, you need to have an amazing, amazing, amazing team. And if somebody is not a fit, and I'm not saying not contrarian, you do want contrarian. Like, if you and I are together, right? I want you to stand and check me. I want you to push back and poke at my ideas. So I'm not saying, oh, everybody's got to be, everybody's got to be drinking the same Kool-Aid. No. I just think that you need people that know how to run all out,
Hmm.
full out, that marathon towards success. And yeah, so it's kind of like, if things are not gelling and fitting, make a change. Don't belabor it. Change,
Yeah.
pivot faster. Whether that's firing people, whether that's changing the model, just test it, change it. Keep
Yep.
innovating, because
Yeah.
that lack of innovation, if you stick hard in what you're doing, like, you might be causing your own failure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I need to hear that. It's good advice.
Yeah.
Don, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun. I
I had
appreciate
a
your
great
time.
time.
And
And thank you for sharing your vision. Like, this really was collaborative, a really good back and forth. I loved it.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Hope to have you back on someday. Let's do a
Yeah,
V2.
totally.
Awesome.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Have a great